Nonprofit voice, and we're telling the stories of Kansas City nonprofits and the people behind them. KC Cares is the intersection of the nonprofit and profit communities, making Kansas City a better place to live, work, and play. This KC Cares segment is brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, www.kaufman.org. I'm Ruth Bombigas. On KC Cares, Ask the Expert, we often dive into particular issues that nonprofits deal with, and today is no different. For our episode, we have turned to our Doctor of Philanthropy, Jeffrey Byrne of Byrne, Pawlowski and Associates, to talk about the generosity crisis. So buckle your seatbelts. We're off to the races. Jeffrey, welcome back.
Thanks a lot, Ruth. Good to be here, and happy spring.
Yay!
Hey, is right.
What the heck is the generosity crisis? We have enough crises. Now we have another one. What is this one all about?
Yeah, my friend Nathan Chappell has written a book along with Brian Crimmins and Michael Ashley about the crisis in generosity and what to do about it as well. Actually, Nathan will be here in Kansas City on April 30th at 10 a.m. For anyone who wants to join us. Come to our website, byrnepawlowski.com, and you will be guided to how to register for for our workshop with Nathan. But there is a generosity there. First of all, let me back up and say we are the most generous people on the face of the earth. We gave nearly $500 billion away to charity in 2022. And, the economy in nonprofits as part of the overall economy, we're 10% of the overall economy of the United States nonprofits contribute to. It's 2.1% of GDP. And the nonprofits, Ruth, in 2016, they employed over 12.3 million in the workforce, people in the workforce. So nonprofits are a major component, and without nonprofits and without generosity of Americans, the nonprofits, our economy could not do what it does. Healthcare and social services, in education, in the environment, the arts, all these areas and sectors are very important to the overall economy. However, over the past 20 years, Ruth, giving has gone down by American households by 16%. If we just look back 24 years ago, nearly 66% of overall households in America were giving. Today, it's 49.5%. And, if we don't do something about sparking giving by all households in America, we are going to be out of business in nonprofits in another 50 years. So, without really doing something, I think that we are in a crisis. So what we have asked Nathan Chappell is to join us in Kansas City. I heard him back in November at the Giving Institute's winter board meeting, and he is the economist for Donor Search, a wealth engine company. And he was very enlightening about technology, about some solutions, and about radical connection. And you ask, what is radical connection? Well, connection's not about money. It's about relationships. And, it's taking an old concept of, what is fundraising? It's really between one person and the donor. And it's telling a story, and it's building a relationship. And today in our with technology, we have gotten so advanced with technology that sometimes we become very transactional and impersonal versus trying to build that relationship. So what we've got to do is disrupt the old way of thinking, take the new way of thinking, and then build into that model how we radicalize relationships, or as Nathan Chappelle talks about, radicalizing connectivity.
Oh, I love that term. Now, I know we have talked on previous Ask the Experts about the Giving Institute and the Giving USA report, and giving's at an all-time high. So if it's not these households, then we've relied on what? Institutional giving from corporations, foundations, et cetera, and that's continued to tick up. So, okay, what's wrong? What's been the things that have shifted? You do mention technology. Depersonalizing, if you will. We think it's very personal to hold these things up and say, oh, I can connect with everybody. And it is a form of connection.
Yeah.
Nathan is talking about what then? That's radical.
Well, what he's really talking about, and what philanthropy is about connections and not the money. Philanthropy is defined as the love of mankind. And if we look at philanthropy and we look at the outward expressions of connection, it's just not about giving money, but it's about offering advocacy, and it's also about providing volunteerism. So these are transformational opportunities, not necessarily transactional opportunities. So, I think that as we need to grow the donor base once again of American households giving. We in Kansas City did a giving report in 2008 with the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation and Byrne Pulaski and the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. And at that point, we found that from an overall household giving per average donation, we were above the national average. So if giving right now is at $1,800 per dollars per household of the 49.5% that give, then we probably were about 20 to 25% above that overall generosity level of greater Kansas City households. So that is due partly, Ruth, to the fact that we do have an overabundance of foundations. Foundations normally provide about 15 cents of every dollar in Kansas City, and now in Giving USA, it's about 18 to 20 cents of all dollars are given by foundations. And in Kansas City, we're probably about 23, 24 cents of all dollars giving by foundations. Joyce Hall and his family were trailblazers back in the 1940s when they created a foundation that would benefit Kansas City for many years to come. And now we have new our banking families with the Kemper family on both the UMB side and Commerce banking sides. They were part of that. Then in the 1980s, Mr. and Mrs. Kaufman created wealth for hundreds of thousands or thousands of individuals through Marion Laboratories. They started giving money away, and in the early to mid 90s, Mr. and Mrs. Kaufman then left nearly $2 billion. Mr. Kaufman and Mrs. Kaufman gave about $350 million to a foundation. And then if we look at the 2000s to 2020s, we have a lot of families, some older families like the Sunderland family, who, had a nice foundation in the 1990s and the 2000s and 2010s of about $100 million. But because of some familial issues and generational issues, that foundation is nearly $2.5 to $3 billion to now. You've got the Neil Patterson family that started Cerner, along with Cliff Illig, two billionaire families right there. That have created the Pattersons have created $1 billion foundation. So these are what we call mega gifts. And mega gifts are defined by Giving USA as gifts of $350 million or more. And, in 2020, there were $10.1 billion given by mega gifts. In 2021, there was $14.9 billion given. Now, we might say, oh, that's really good because people are very generous and giving. However, it's the giving at the very highest levels of the income bracket and not necessarily the average households. It's the average Joes like me and you, Ruth, that give to charity, give the majority to charity. But that imbalance is, but there is an imbalance there, and it is changing. So we've got to do something about
All right. So if they're giving these mega gifts and stuff, so why should we be worried? If they're continuing to grow and bring that in, why do we need the rest?
Well, we need the rest because we need Americans to, we need the average households to give to charity because we have done that historically over the last 80 years that we've been recording numbers. That philanthropy really comes from individuals. It does not come from foundations. Only 5 cents of every dollar comes from a corporation. So really, it's about the individual that gives. For instance, let me take you back a few years. When I got involved in philanthropy in 1988, I cannot believe it's been 36 years, Ruth. But when I got involved in philanthropy in 1988, nearly 50 cents of every dollar was given to religion. Today, that's about 30 cents of every dollar giving
Wow.
to religion. Now, as the pie has grown, because we are $500 billion of gifts to charity overall by Americans. What has happened is that different sectors, the environment, animal welfare, have come into play and have taken part of that. But there are less people that are going to church these days. And it used to be you gave when your butt was in the pew, as we like to, and you gave. Well, your butt doesn't have to be in the pew any longer because you're automatically deducting off of your iPhone, a monthly stipend or gift to your church or to your parish or to your synagogue or mosque. So, we are giving differently today, but we've got to continue to really push the envelope to get more people and more households to give.
We're talking with Dr. Philanthropy, Jeffrey Byrne, and we're talking about the generosity crisis. So, what's been everybody throws things at technology. I get it. It's an easy thing to blame, but has there been any other things going on societal wise that have changed? Is it the way the generations under you and I, as we are so young, and what they may have learned or heard? What's making the earthquake?
Yeah. Well, I think there are a few areas that we really need to concentrate on, Ruth, as we are looking at, how to start to solve and turn around these numbers. And I would just suggest that people read the book, The Generosity Crisis, because in this book, there is details on solutions through radical connection to help to solve this. And let me give you 4 very general opportunities for nonprofits and leaders to think about as they are talking with donors. Number one, generosity follows radical connection. Well, what does that mean? Radical connection is really developing and creating deep relationships with your donors. And it's a donor relationship. It is not a nonprofit or money relationship. So, if you think about it, create the nonprofits need to create these relationships around the mission of the organization, not the amount of money they're trying to raise. If you think of Patagonia, for instance, what do you think of when you think of Patagonia? You think of the environment. What do you think of them taking care and giving back to environment and landscapes across the world? And oh yeah, it's a coat that I buy too, for those winter days. You think of Tesla. What do you think of Tesla? Well, electric cars, e-cars, aren't those good for the environment? Of course they are. So in a way, these companies have used they have used a radical connection with their buyers in the fact that they have developed these deep relationships where when you buy a Tesla, you're really buying one because you want an electric car, you want to save on fossil fuels up into the atmosphere. Now, you forget about all the batteries that are being used in these cars as well. But that's a topic for another conversation, and I'm sure that Tesla is going to continue to have that. So I think, you have to think about forming deep relationships. The second area is you have to have an authentic and inclusion have to be part of the critical areas that you're going to do for development for success. And what do I mean by authenticity and inclusion? You've got to be authentic when you go to a donor's home or you go to their office or you take them to lunch. You've got to be transparent. You've got to be inclusive. You've got to invite them into your home, and then you have to encourage them to invite you into their home, because that is building these radical connections, these deep relationships that we are talking about. So the third area I would say to think about for the generosity crisis and a solution is being transparent and accountable with the resources that you're given and your own connectivity with your donors. So what do I mean by that? I mean that nonprofits must do what they say they will at the highest ethical standards, and then they have to report back how that went. So you have to report back. It's like sort of like you've got to fulfill promises, Ruth. You've got to share financials. You've got to turn lemons sometimes into lemonades, or you just have to say, look, I have a lemon here. I have a problem. And hey, how about Ruth helping me figure out how I might solve this? Now that creates vulnerability. Okay, so vulnerability is a lot of times to someone a negative. But Brene Brown has talked about vulnerability and the vulnerability and how that really makes us prosper. So, vulnerability evokes trust, and we've got to think about how to create better trust between that donor and the nonprofit as well. And the last part I would say about the generosity crisis and a very high level thought process about solutions, it's about the organization and the mission, and it's not about you. It's not about the executive director, the CEO, the director of programs. It's really about the organization. And you've got to connect to that donor on his or her side, not on yours. So how many times have I been out with nonprofits and their executives and talked to donors, and we're talking about all the things that we're doing, and we're not asking the donor questions and trying to engage them and get them to enter the conversation. So we've really got to connect with donors and prospects in a different way.
What is the best way? You mentioned authenticity, and that was the first thing that popped into my mind is how do you create these relationships that are authentic and not just, gee, Mr. Smith, I know Mr. Smith has got lots of money that's not going somewhere, and making sure it's not just, I know you have money and I need it.
It takes time. So, and that's what we don't have. We don't have time. And many directors of development and CEOs, they don't have time to get their job done during the day. And on top of that, they have to raise money and they have to go out and talk to foundations, corporations, and individuals. And that takes time. But smart organizations, and we work with a lot of smart organizations because their thought process is to do a $62 million campaign for Kansas City, Kansas Community College, who has never raised any money. It takes time, and you got to give it the time it takes. Actually, it took them 4 years to successfully raise $62 million, which was our campaign goal. But our leadership and our partners came together, and they knew that they had the time to do this the right way, because they didn't have an opportunity to do it the wrong way, because we had to raise the money in a public-private partnership. So you've got to give those relationships, you've got to give those donor-centric conversations, not nonprofit-centered centric conversations, but the donor-centric conversations. Ruth, you've got to give those time to develop, and you've got to give the donor the opportunity to ask you, then, how can I help you accomplish what you want? When you hear that, you know that you have a donation. Now, you don't know what the size is, perhaps, but you do know that you have a donation. So I think part of it's time, is listening, is developing relationships, is bringing vulnerability into the conversation, is being very transparent. And it is bringing that donor along. As I like to call it with the nonprofits that we help to serve, we're dripping on the donor or the prospect. We have an activity a week, we have an activity per month, and those are instituted to keep that donor moving along with us in this conversation process.
How do you get development officers, executive directors of nonprofit to figure out the time and then the folks to talk to? Because I'm hearing you say we've got to talk to not just the large donor, we've got to be able to talk to the general, Joe and Jane out there, because they play a really pivotal role that has been diminishing and going away as the next generations come up. I think of my own kids who are in their late 20s and 30s, living their life, getting all involved in that. How do you bring those folks in who are so busy living their lives?
It's tough. There's no doubt about it. The professional gatekeeper who is hired by a foundation, that's their job, is to meet with potential donors, and or grant seekers. Individuals who give, obviously, the majority of the money in the United States. It's takes time. You have to build deep relations. It's got to be donor centric. It can't be about the money in your portfolio. So when we ask a development officer, how much is your portfolio of 100 to 150 donors that you're responsible for? Tell me about Tell me about your donors and the relationships you built with those top 10 donors. Tell me and talk to me about those relationships and how those are coming along. Not the dollar assigned to them, not the dollar you want to ask them, but tell me, in the process of this conversation around radical connection, where are you in that developing that deep relationship, so that donor turns to you and says, which is a magical phrase, how can I help you, Ruth? What can I do for you? And I've heard that many times from donors that we've worked with over a long period of time, who have that connection, and then they turn around and say, I want to help you now. What can I do? And it's more about than just money, too. It's about volunteerism. It's about advocacy, as well as the dollar.
So can we use technology in this new, radical connection? So it isn't impersonal, but useful?
Absolutely. And I'm going to have a little bit of, once again, a promotion about the generosity crisis in the book, and also the April 30th workshop that we are doing with Nonprofit Connect and Bank of America. And technology is a part of that. And artificial intelligence is a real part of the solution to building those connections. It's not necessarily using technology to raise money, but it's using technology and artificial intelligence and working on your donor base to create structured and very personal relationships with those donor files on your database. And the way we use artificial intelligence right now is a very fast-moving technology and conversation that our leaders in philanthropy on the fundraising side are having. And we're going to bring that to Kansas City on the 30th of April. And I know that, Ruth, you're going to be talking to Nathan Chappell for one of these Ask the Expert before that as well.
This is probably scary for some people. What would you say to folks who are hesitant, saying, well, we've been doing this, why do we have to change?
Well, you have to change because the amount of dollars that broad America, that a big base of Americans are giving is going down. So the average American is giving less, number one, and less average Americans, households are giving. So if we don't change that, then we're going to be out of business in 25 to 50 years. So, I don't think there's an option of not doing it. It's just the degree that a nonprofit has available to them, the time they have, the wisdom of their boards, the wisdom of their management is, do we have the opportunity to be a bit more transformational in our conversations, or do we have to go out and raise X dollars by X date, which is a real thing that you have to do. So it's playing both sides and trying to come to some median solution that you're still developing that connectivity with that donor, but you are also very donor-centric in your conversations.
Well, it sounds exciting to me because I'm one of those people. I would much rather have an in-person conversation than going through a text. I think you're right. The time factor is part of the mind shift on it. And if we don't spend the time, then we're going to see things continue to go down that slippery slope. So thank you for bringing this concept. And I know we'll get a deeper dive. And I'm sure folks, we have to be totally transparent. We are not receiving any money from Nathan Chappell, but this is something we wanted to bring, and this whole idea for people to wrap their arms around and at least take advantage of getting to hear about him and this concept. So Jeffrey, thank you as always for bringing us the newest, the greatest, and giving us tips. We appreciate Dr. Philanthropy.
Thanks a lot, Ruth. I really enjoyed being on your program. I'm sorry I got so deep on a big topic that's very important.
I think it's great. And we want to thank you for joining us for KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're produced by a nonprofit, Charitable Communications. And this KC Cares segment was brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, www.kauffman.org. If you'd like to be a guest on KC Cares or underwriting opportunities, you can go to our website, kccaresonline.org, and spread the love. You'll find us on Facebook and Twitter at KC Cares Radio and Instagram KC Cares Online. Don't forget, catch us on Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on ESPN 1510 a.m. and 94.5 FM. Thank you for joining us on KC Cares.